Hello, how's it going? Okay, today I'm going to talk about my bargaining with grief. I want to start with a quote by Brene Brown. She's a freaking rock star. It says, "We run from grief because loss scares us, yet our hearts reach toward grief because the broken parts want to mend." I think it's beautiful. There's this grief cycle. We've probably all been through it, even if we don't realize we have. I think it's just part of our existence as humans, personally. So I'm just going to hurry and go through kind of my experience briefly. And the reason I'm doing this is not to, I don't want anyone to feel bad for me. I just want to share this so that if anyone else goes through something similar, they can just feel like they're not the only person. And some of these thoughts that I share with you, they are thoughts I had years ago and not thoughts that I think today. And that's a very important distinction I like to make because I believe that my thoughts create my results in my life. And I'll touch on that a little bit more at the end. So, okay, so phase one, shock, initial paralysis at hearing bad news. I heard bad news from my husband and I totally went into shock. I sat in shock. He was crying. I sat in shock. Uh, I felt that. It was totally, that might be manifest in different ways, but that's kind of how I handled it. And I kind of like went through my days like little zombie in shock. Uh, two, step two, and this isn't like the only grief cycle. This is just something I pulled off the internet, but it looked like something I'd experienced. So, step two, denial, trying to avoid the inevitable. I totally did this. When other professionals told my husband that he was an addict due to like the low number of times that he followed through on his compulsive behavior, I was like, sweet. And I think my husband was like, sweet. And it was like a total relief, like, oh, good. He's not one of those guys. Like, I'm not married to one of like those guys. And even in my initial therapy session, I remember my specialized therapist referred to my husband as an addict. And I kind of like cocked my head and looked at her. And she was like, did I say something? Is there something wrong? And I was like, well, he's not an addict. Like, he's had professionals tell him that he's not, and she's just like, "Oh, okay. I'll respond, I'll refer to him as something different." And ultimately, like she was the one who brought it out like a year later. And it was like probably right when it needed to be, but she was the one who helped my husband and I realize that he actually was an addict and needed some help. So I feel like when she helped us get there in the most loving, compassionate way possible, that's when both of our recovery started. So with this denial, I was in denial phase for like probably a year and 3 months. I can't speak for my husband, but I think for me, that's about how long I was in that phase. And then the recovery started, which was great. But then the phase after denial is anger, and you better believe that I experienced some of that too. Um, in a lot of ways, it was easy to just stay in denial because there were so many things to focus on. We had little kids, and we were trying to manage his health with all the pills and the cocktails and things like that. It was very consuming. Um, and I'm sure like the addict piece inside of my husband was thrilled about these distractions, right? But once I did accept the addiction for what it was, I definitely got mad. There were outbursts, angry thoughts, like you name it. And one thing I want to share that I've heard from a podcast, Betrayed, Addict, and the Expert, is that anger isn't necessarily a bad thing. Showing emotion demonstrates that people still care about the relationship. And I still cared about the relationship, but obviously I had some crap to process. Um, so, in between therapy sessions, I still just, I had these emotions I needed to process. And, sometimes I couldn't wait till the next one to work through, like I couldn't just wait, like when it comes to like your emotions and like needing to deal with stuff, it doesn't just happen like every week, right on cue with your therapy appointment, right? So, just some things that I did to help me process things. Um, I wrote letters to people that I trusted, but I never sent them. It's just a way to like get something from the inside of me to the outside of me. And that's something I heard from that same podcast. When people go through betrayal trauma, one of the first things that this expert recommends to people that they can do for themselves is to move something from the inside of their body to the outside, whether it's singing, playing instruments, exercising, writing. For some reason, listening to music really helped me process a lot of stuff too. Another thing too, like with regard to anger, is it's usually a mask of like a more underlying, deeper emotion. So if you ever feel like anger, maybe be willing to sit with it a little bit longer and kind of observe it from like an observer standpoint to see if you can unveil a deeper emotion. Step 4, bargaining, seeking for a way out. I was desperate to believe that this bad news was irreversible. It wasn't. Step 5, depression, a final realization of the inevitable. Totally went there. I felt like my life had spiraled from something like perfect and better than what I could dream up to like the worst thing imaginable. And, on top of just like that trauma between me and my spouse, I was I felt like I was torn away from my babies. There was a lot of pain and bitterness. And I remember a few 2-week periods where things that normally brought me joy did not bring me joy. And my therapist recognized this as well. So there was some depression, some PTSD like behavior that I experienced. Testing, seeking realistic solutions. Okay, so who hates this cycle? I hated this cycle. I went through it. It was not fun. But today I'm in a place where I can say that it served me. And I went through some of these stages more than once. And I went through some of this with regard to my spouse and other humans. And, I'm not 100% sure how or why, but I feel like it happened the way it needed to. I had some pain I needed to process. I learned how to survive through all this thanks to, my tenacity as a human, but also thanks to my therapist. And then about a year and a half ago, I started listening to this amazing life coaching podcast. And then I got a life coach. And, this podcast, I remember there are these ideas that just seem completely like a little bit out there and like beyond reach, but not so far out there that I lost intrigue. So part of me was like, what is this? Like, I want more. Like, is there truth in this? Was it possible I could learn to thrive in my current circumstance, like regardless of anybody else? Like, is this true? What is this? Um, I thirsted for more and I got more. And then 7, acceptance, finally finding a way forward. So through the life coaching, I started taking ownership over my emotions rather than blaming anyone else for them. I realized how empowering and liberating it is to accept that I have zero control over anyone else's actions and I have 100% control over mine. My emotions are a direct result of the thoughts that I have about my circumstances. And guess what? Our thoughts are completely optional. I get to choose what thoughts I think about circumstances. And those thoughts that I think elicit certain emotions which drive my actions in life. If this isn't the most like empowering bit of information I could allow myself to believe, I don't know what else is. I found a way to rewrite the thoughts that I had about the past. And I didn't change my past circumstances, but I changed the way I thought about them. And this helped me to heal, to survive, to thrive, and get to a point where I just felt like I couldn't help but share this information with other people because I felt very alone when I was going through all of this, and I would have loved to have had more information um, about all of these mind management tools. I used to think life happened to me. Like I remember saying that life happened to me. And I now realize I'm in complete control of the results in my life. And I'm not in control of other people's results, other people's actions. That's about them. That's not something I'm in control of, but I am in control of my results in my life. And so by saying that, if I want to choose to believe that I am a complete victim and that I didn't deserve any of these things to happen, that's a choice. And I can choose to think that and then feel that feeling of powerlessness, which drives an action, which results in like that continued result, right? But if I want to believe that everything happened to me the way it needed for me to needed to happen for me to progress to be the perfect woman, mom, and human that I am today, that's a choice that I can think and think enough to where it becomes a belief. And that is what I choose to believe about myself. And I am choosing to think these thoughts long enough so that they turn into a belief. So, anyway, there you go. I hope that makes sense. If you need further clarification, I do offer free mini sessions. So, on my website, you can click a link to sign up for free 30-minute mini sessions if you're interested in learning more about this stuff. It's amazing. And I think the biggest thing is I'm so grateful for the change that it's made in my life, but it's also created changes like in like all aspects of my life. And my relationships are better because of these tools that I've learned. And the cool thing is, it's not because everyone else is changing, it's because I'm changing the way I'm thinking about other people. And it's just amazing. So check it out. Come talk to me.